adjust this a little bit so we can get that amazing artwork back there. Hold on. Because this is all about graffiti. So I gotta have, you know, one of my prized possessions right here. You know how it is.
Well, it's not just about graffiti, is it?
It's never just about graffiti. Not if you're real hip hop.
Legs. So, you know, first of all, you know, for those that are joining us that know you or may not know you, it's important.
Most of them don't.
Well, it's important to let them know a little bit about you. And I'll be brief because it's just you have such a long resume. You are president of Rocksteady Crew, a well-established dance group since what, 77? You were part of Rocksteady.
I joined Rocksteady in 79.
In 79.
Jimmy Lee, 77 or about. You know,
Right.
That's even up for debate these days.
Right. Well, let me shoot off some accolades because I really want to dig into all of this. Of course, you are not just a dancer. You are a choreographer. You are a social justice advocate and a warrior, let's just say. And you are also the creator and promoter of Puerto Rocksteady, which is a series of concerts and events in Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rocksteady for Life, which is also a humanitarian effort that you...
Rocksteady for Life. Yeah, just
Rocksteady for Life, sorry. Yes. That you have started. And the list goes on with you, and you are also an official Red Bull dancer representative.
I'm part of what's called the
Icon program, an ambassador, and also more importantly, an ambassador to hip hop culture worldwide. That since you were a kid, you've played that role. So that's, you know, you got some pretty big shoes to fill, I must add. And I've known you, we've known each other since we were yay high. So
yeah, I know you since like maybe 81?
Probably, yeah.
About 81.
And so, you know, this discussion, you and I often collaborate, and you often collaborate with a lot of graffiti artists to do work with you. You have a lot of graffiti artists in the Rocksteady crew, past and present. And here at the museum, we're of course acknowledging graffiti writers, but there's another component to this that doesn't often get spoken about, is the interdisciplinary part of graffiti artists, that they have this other life as well as b-boys.
Yeah.
Lord knows I tried to be a dancer and a b-boy dancer. I am a b-boy, but not the dancer, but it is a difficult and creative dance that I love very much. And I learned through you and the other dancers how interconnected that is to graffiti style writing, both in spirit, but also in language, right? And how, and we'll go into this conversation about it. But I want to start off with some images that you sent me. And of course,
before we do that, can I just show you one thing?
Yeah.
Because I still have this. This, just so everybody knows, this was done by Mayor back in 1992. And it was in memory of Buck Four. So I'd like to dedicate this interview to my best friend who passed away, Buck Four. And I still cherish this. And there you go. A bunch of stuff I'll show you later on.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, thank you for the shout out and much respect to Buck Four and his legacy. Yeah. So Legs, you know, I want to start our talk with kind of some of the images you sent me, and the first one is of you as a kid, probably taken with a 126 camera. And tell me about when you were a kid, you know, in the early days, you know, when you start seeing this culture, hip hop, or hip hop before hip hop, let's just say.
Yeah.
What were you gravitating to first? What did you notice first? Was it the dancing or the graffiti or the rapping?
Well, all right. So the first thing I ever saw was breaking in '76. So that's like a year before this picture. And my cousin Lenny Len brought me. Well, no, I'm sorry, no, wrong story. In front of my house, my brother Robert Cologne and Africa Islam, who lived one block down from me, were comparing moves on the floor. And you know, I'm looking at them like, you know, why is my brother humiliating my family in front of our home? Why is he throwing himself on the floor? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And I actually put my head down in shame because they weren't playing any music and there was no context for me. And and at the time, I didn't know that my brother and Islam, you know, they were part of the organization B-Boys. And the organization became the Mighty Zulu Nation, and the Mighty Zulu Nation became the Universal Zulu Nation. So, is that mine or yours?
That's mine. Forgive me. Let me just shut this down.
So, yeah. So, I didn't have any context, and then my cousin who lived upstairs from me ended up moving over to the Crotona Avenue section of the Bronx, Crotona between 183rd and 187th. And, you know, he comes back and, you know, he starts telling me about all these things. Like, he started learning about Chain 3, TMT, Cade, King Case, all these writers that he was aware of, learning from, and you know, he had a very natural style for writing. So then he also started going into, it got to a point where he started telling me like, yo, Rich, you got to come to the jam, man. I'm like, I don't know what a jam is. And he was telling me like, yo, they're breaking, and you know, he would just basically kind of like describe what was happening at these jams. So he brings me to 180th Street and Crotona Avenue to the schoolyard over there. I think it's IS 57. Could be wrong. But I go there and there's this Puerto Rican cat named Little Angel. He was the DJ. The crowd was a mixed crowd. It was black, Puerto Rican, and that's it. Unless there was someone Cuban or Dominican that I didn't know about. But I wasn't really into knowing who was what back then because it was either like you were black, Puerto Rican, Irish, Italian,
right,
and anything Asian that you would consider Chinese because we were that ignorant and we weren't taught those things, like, you know, to understand the differences between the different backgrounds of people. So, yeah, so I actually, I saw graffiti first. No, I saw breaking first, out of context. Then I saw his graffiti. Then he brought me to a jam. And then when I went to the jam, you know, I was blown away because there were writers there that day. Not by design, it's just what people did in the hood. And there were B-girls, B-boys, DJ, no MCs yet. I didn't see any MCs yet. So I had fallen in love with the energy of what was happening. And I think, you know, I'm like 10 years old, bro. And I just was blown away. I felt like that was the moment that I came to life. And it wasn't over breaking. It was over everything. And without any, like, preconceived notion that you had to be down with hip-hop, breaking, graffiti, blah, blah, blah. Because that thought process didn't even exist back then. Because It was just ghetto games, and we did what we did, and that's how we lived. So that's, you know, that was it.
Yeah, and so...
Oh, wait. But I tried to dance that day. I was a straight bum. My clothes, my gear was mad whack. I tried it, but it was the first time I was shy. Like, I'd watch Soul Train and all these other things and see the Temptations and the moves and all that stuff. But when I tried to dance that day, I had nothing, and I tried to imitate people, and I tried to drop down into like a half split like anyone else would do, James Brown style. And you know, from that point on, I started practicing with my cousin Lenny Len, start practicing, and then 6 months later, I developed faster than him, and I started teaching him after 6 months. So that was it.
so that was the entry point. But then again, as you in your youth, then you start getting good and you start associating with these dancers, right? You start connecting.
Well, writers and dancers at the same time.
Writers and dancers at the same time.
Writers.
And I'm glad you said that, because you shared an image with me. And you have your cousin Lenny Len amongst the crowd, Ken Swift, who was also a writer, Mr. Freeze, and Frosty Freeze, who was a writer, Ty Fly, who was a writer, Rip 7.
Kenny, Dualism.
Yeah,
and Ty Fly used to write too. I don't, you know, he used to tag up, but I don't know how up he was. But yeah,
well, Ty Fly was he lived in my project, so he was really kind of a local, like either the projects, or
yeah. I wouldn't say he was up
in the neighborhood.
I would see his name.
And so at this point, you know, when we think about Rocksteady Crew, and infamously, you know, when I met you guys, you know, Kippy D was a writer, Doze was a writer, Ken Swift and his brother Tunier were writers, Bill Blast was a writer.
Scene used to be around as well, Black Scene.
Yeah. And so at this point, you know, like when we're looking at this image where you have T-Kid painting graffiti rock canvas for you guys. By the way, people should know this about T-Kid 170. He was also a b-boy.
Yep.
He was also a dancer.
Probably was dancing before me.
Yeah. So tell me about this photograph and that period.
Oh, so that was at a place called Common Grounds. We were preparing for our first actual show. Well, actually, a little backstory as to how he got there. Henry Chalfant knew Take One. So Take One was also a writer and part of Rocksteady. I met Take One when he was part of another crew called Rock City Rockers. Then he got down with me. And I was also part of Rock City Rockers from Washington Heights, where they had another crew called Uptown Crazy Crew that I was down with, but which was a whole, you know, like Boppo 184, Victor, I forgot what his number was, but there were those writers from up over in that area. So I knew them. And then Take One was talking to Henry Chalfant, and then he had pointed out the article that had came out in the Village Voice where Martha Cooper had taken pictures of, I think it was called FM B-Boys from the Upper West Side. And they, you know, they came out and I knew who they were. They were all right. They weren't that good. But they came out and they had gotten arrested for breaking. And even those dudes were actually writers as well. So the thing with that was that Henry was asking him if he knew what that was. And then Take One was like, hey, I know people who are better than that. So he brought me and Frosty Freeze to Henry's studio where we did just like a quick demo. And Henry Chalfant was like, hey, I'm doing this show and I'd like to have you guys as a part of it. And at that point, Henry Chalfant was doing a presentation of like happenings that were happening in the streets. So he already had his writers down. You know, we already had T-Kid down, and then the writing community and downtown Soho, what eventually became Soho art scene, whether it be like Mud Club, Fun Gallery, et cetera, were all people who would be in attendance at that place. And so we end up doing a show, and I didn't know that Henry Chalfant didn't know any rappers. So when Ramelzi and Fat Five Freddy were part of it, Fat Five Freddy had told Henry that he could rap, and he was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And that's how Fat Five Freddy got his like start within the industry, because no one had ever heard of him before that. And then Ramelzi, and I think Ramelzi was there, but you know, for us it was bizarre because we were listening to like the upper echelon of MCs: Cold Crush, Busy Bee, Fantastic, Furious Five, you know, all Cosmic Force, all these people who were like making all the noise in the scene. So when it was funny because when we met Freddie and Ramelzi, we were making fun of their style of rap. And we were just young and wild, and we just made fun of everybody. But at Common Ground, where the event was originally supposed to take place, there was a situation with a gang called Ball Busters. So the Ball Busters was a predominantly Dominican gang. And at that point, Rocksteady Crew, we had a lot of like street cred. And to be honest, a lot of girls who heard about us would roll by Rocksteady Park and want to hang out. And a lot of those girls were like from other crews or gangs or whatever. And it kind of caused a jealousy, against Rocksteady, because a lot of people wanted to come by Rocksteady Park and be like, what's up? What's the deal with them? Like, what's so dope about them? And let's go check them out. Let's go hang out with them. But anyway, that fight, a fight almost broke out at Common Ground. So we ended up doing the show, I believe, 2 weeks later at the Kitchen Center for Performing Arts, which was the first actual graffiti rock presentation, which had like all 4 elements. And the thing about that, and I only thought about this year, it was that show was predominantly Latino. And I only point that out because, a lot of people aren't really aware of the Latino contribution to hip hop. So the first presentation of hip hop before it had its name as a happening in all of its elements was graffiti rock, and presented by Henry Chalfant, and it consisted of mostly Latino people. Yeah.
What's interesting is that I knew Ramelzi as a writer. We went writing once, and I knew him from East New York, being with Dondi back in 1979 and heading out to Brooklyn. I had no idea he was a rapper. I knew him as EG3 and Ramelzi. And then next thing you know, when he does this, he starts coming downtown, we realize, oh, wait, he's an MC,
Yeah.
And then, but he's just much more than that. He's a performance artist.
Yeah.
So the downtown scene, again, and I'm glad you kind of pointed out some of this history, because it sets you kind of this picture about what New York once was, where uptown, that culture came downtown, and next thing you know, you're integrating with a whole nother scene that has no clue as to what graffiti is, no less breakdancing, or b-boying rather.
Yeah, it was punk rockers, downtown art scene people, Rastafarians, and all of us from wherever we came from with our whole hip hop vibe.
Right. Another thing I want to share with everybody, again, this image,
yes.
Because here, rest in peace to Frosty Freeze and Kippy D. Kippy D on the upper left-hand corner, and Frosty Freeze in the lower center with the goggles.
And Take One.
And Take One. And Ken Swift, and that's
Chino.
Chino on the
Spidey D.
Yeah. And so, as you think about these days, I think none of us foresaw what was to come of any of this, right? It was in this period. This photo was taken by Matthew Olsak, right, at Antonio Lopez's studio.
I'm trying to remember, because it was either Matthew or Antonio, because both of them were taking pictures of us at different times within the same studio. There were actual photos that Antonio was taking. But yeah, Matthew was the dude too.
And so at that time, in the early 80s, none of us knew, so to speak, that it would blow up. But I think we all had started realizing that there was some kind of platform outside just the hood for our work. Obviously the trains, and then it was, okay, well, let's take this to the clubs or the skating rink, and
yeah. There was no, when it came to, especially like battles, there were no promos or anything like that, except that was probably like the first, that flyer has to be the first promoted battle between 2 crews with a flyer. I don't think any other flyer was ever done before that. I don't remember ever seeing one. And when I look at all the Buddy Esquire flyers and Phase 2 and Cisco Kid and what's the other one? I don't want to miss any names. But anyway, yeah, wow, I never even thought about that. That's like the first B-boy flyer. And, and that was in '81.
Done by Doze Green.
Yeah, and the reason why we got to that event at Lincoln Center, which was the first time anything ever had been done at Lincoln Center in terms of hip hop, when we were filming Style Wars, we were filming at United States of America when we filmed the battle. So for me, I felt like, all right, well, we're battling dynamic on their turf in Queens, far from where we live. It was like the Warriors, you know, trying to get back to Brooklyn, you know, except we were going the opposite direction. So when we battled them, the guy that was DJing, another Puerto Rican cat, I believe he's Puerto Rican, was a guy named Baby J. And Baby J, you know, he did a great job. And then I think you have Ramelzi on the microphone and Fat Fat Freddy again. But when they asked who won that battle, they said, you know, they gathered that it was a tie based on the crowd. So me, I'm thinking like, all right, well, I'm in your neighborhood. I'm in your neighborhood, and this is a tie. So, you know, and the thing is, like, Henry Child Fund, like, we could have just battled ourselves and done the video that way, because that's the way we were doing our shows at the time. But we were like, all right, well, you know, we want to battle this crew anyway. So we told Henry about it, and we ended up filming over there at United States of America. But we were pissed off, and then we were like, yo, boom. Henry wanted us to do a performance at Lincoln Center Out of Doors program, and we were like, bet. But you know what? It was supposed to be like Rocksteady split up in two, and we would call ourselves Rocksteady versus Breakmasters, and just do a battle performance. So instead we were like, all right, well, you know what? Lincoln Center, neutral ground, let's invite Dynamic to battle again. And that's how that battle happened.
And I got to tell you, it was incredible. And yeah. I still remember it, and I still remember that the turnout was incredible, and also the aftermath. We all went up back on the train tagging.
And even during the stage collapse, part of a corner of the stage collapse.
Yeah.
You know, people were supposed to be in the audience, and you know, people. Oh, you know, you set up a battle. People are gonna just like crowd in, and there was too much weight on the stage.
So let me ask you something about Dynamic. Did you know of any writers in that crew?
Ooh, no, I didn't.
I'm curious.
not gonna say that they weren't.
Right.
But if there were.
No, it would make sense that some of them were. I just don't know who they are.
Yeah, I just don't remember, because if they were, they had to be hitting up the Queens lines, you know? There was no R train back then. So I guess you would have to think about, like, you would have to ask somebody like
I mean, there were R trains that just...
yeah. Oh, yeah? Well, I mean, I know, but they were along the 7 line.
Oh,
so
okay, yeah.
You would have, like, I know the dude who was killing the 7 line was a dude named Elf.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a legend right there. It's an old story.
I used to date his sister.
There you go. So again, in this relationship with graffiti becoming the visual art of b-boying, the world, you know, because you guys were commercially successful, and of course the one guy in the crew who was the really talented, like, skillful guy was Doze. Yeah. So when you guys, as you could see in the background of this image, it's the Rocksteady and classic Doze style. Yeah. So when you guys were traveling around the world, was part of his role being a b-boy, but also, like, you know, designing the background, painting graph around you guys?
So even before that, Doze was brought into Rocksteady as, you know, through New York City Breakers. But for his role in Rocksteady, I always felt like Doze, ill writer. He was one of the nastiest up rockers back then, you know? And so my vision for him was that role. But because of the direction that we were going with the commercial stuff, those had to break a little more. And he put his work into it, but his cup of tea was writing, of course, and up rock. And yeah, and it's weird how that was put together, because the story behind how that group was formed is I was actually in the hospital at the time because I had torn my groin. So Kool Lady Blue had put together what she thought was a group of people that would represent a look that that can go on tour. Baby Love wasn't a B-girl in Rocksteady. She was a Rebel dancer.
Right.
So Kool Lady Blue took all of them without even speaking with me, and they brought them to a studio in Boston to see if they could sing, so-called see if they could sing. And that happens. I'm not on that. So they ended up recording Hey You the Rocksteady Crew. There's no record deal. There's nothing like that. And then a month later, we find out that the record is in the top 10 in the UK charts. And it's Hey You the Rocksteady Crew, featuring Rocksteady Crew. And we're like, yo, what's going on? We don't even know what's happening. So they released it on Virgin Charisma. So Virgin Records released this without our permission.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's weird because the group I would have put together wouldn't have been necessarily that. I would have probably done it differently.
Understandable. So, one of the things that can be said again about this relationship with b-boying and graph writers, how intertwined they've been in your life and in your professional life, and in the celebration of b-boying. You work with a lot of writers who either were b-boys or understand the b-boy culture, and again, it has to be, you're very good about integrating a look and aesthetic of writing in your promotions.
Yeah, I try to, like, if you look at the one that's the 30th anniversary, there are multiple shirts that were done that represent each element of hip hop. So on the left-hand corner, you have a b-boy, right hand, you have an MC, then you have whatever. I mean, it looks like all elements are in there.
Right, and this was done by B-Boy Ease.
Yeah, no, he wasn't a b-boy. He's a writer from Hawaii that was in Rocksteady.
Oh, that's East. I thought that was
a
different. Okay.
Yeah, so I've used like people like Zero T, East, Doze, Dante, Why Not, who was a b-boy also.
Yeah.
Senior Vice President Rocksteady. I've always felt like, shout out to my dude Brown.
Brown from San Diego.
Yeah, and that is by East as well. And again, in that picture, you'll see all elements of hip hop represented. I always wanted to make sure, like, if there's an MC, there's a writer somewhere, if there isn't a writer in there, it's done by a writer, which speaks for itself.
And then again, you've collaborated, two wonderful collaborations. I got to give Ernie Valles a shout out.
Ernie and Gil.
And because, I mean, though he wasn't a b-boy, as a writer, again, he's somebody that you brought in to help, connect the dots between graph and writing. And of course, he did the lettering for Jam on the Groove, the theater production.
I even forgot that.
Yeah, and so, when you think about this, even I guess you have successfully been able to connect the graffiti writers to the productions you do and these highly successful commercial projects. Which oftentimes, how these companies just kind of fake the funk and get somebody on Madison Avenue to draw quote unquote graffiti type and stuff like that. Have you kind of gotten into any kind of debate about how the artwork should look to represent you or the crew or your projects?
No, my thing is I'll have a theme in my mind of or a message that I want to get across, and then like if I'm picking an artist, I pick that artist based on number one, their skill level, number two, their ability to get across what it is that I'm saying, them to create, and then, but I also don't like to trample on an artist's creativity.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you're gonna pick an artist based on who they are, and hip hop is about representation of yourself and your crew, you need to let that artist put as much of himself into that art as well. Get your message across, but through his vision.
So I have a question for you about this particular poster. It's a French poster, a European poster. But what I see in the center, I see phase 2, his artwork, right? Going across. Phase 2, Fearless 4, Dondi, DST, Futura, Blue, Fab Five Freddy, Rocksteady Crew, and Bambaataa.
Yeah.
Those clearly must be from phase 2.
Yep.
But the rest of it does not look like phase 2.
Well, it looks like the Eiffel Tower is in there. I think they just used his artwork and then just, did a mashup of whatever.
Tell me about this. Give us some insight as to what this event was like.
Well, that was the Hippodrome. That was the day. It's crazy because two interesting things happened on that day. 2 people fell off the stage while performing. And one was done in like the illest, dopest, coolest way. So Ken Swift is doing a backspin, drops out of sight off the stage. And then all of a sudden, pops up back like a superhero. We're like, oh shit, like we thought he really like got hurt. But for whatever reason, I don't know how he landed, but he came up like he was Thor, and it looked like the way he recovered was better than how he got down there. Let's just put it that way. And then and Ramelzi, who was rhyming that day, he was doing his thing, and then boom, just fell off and disappeared. Like we're like, oh shit. So the funny thing is that DST, like we were always clowning each other, man. So DST mocking Ramelzi's style of rapping, we're all on the bus. Ramelzi's like one of the last people to get on the bus, and DST's like in the back of the bus. Ramelzi wasn't rocking to the beat, fell off the stage and went boom. So the whole bus just starts dying laughing because he's doing like the Ramelzi style.
So let me ask you something. When you went to Paris back then, did you encounter writers or b-boys?
No, not at all. There was nothing like that I had seen.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, but then again, you that's something probably to ask like Futura, because those people were Futura or Lee may have already gone to Paris before this time.
I think Lee was in Italy first before Paris.
Yeah, but one of the other interesting things, and this is more of like a mentality, and I don't know if it was in France or in the UK, there was an interesting moment that really made the crowd love us. And when I say us, I mean everyone who was on that tour. The group called the Fantastic Four, which were AKA the McDonald's Double Dutch Girls, they were on stage doing their thing. Someone from the audience throws a bottle, and it hits one of the girls. Dondi and Futura, and I'm not sure who else. I mean, we all ran out on stage. People had belt buckles wrapped around their fists and spray cans or whatever, and they beat the dog shit out of the person that did that. And then all of a sudden they come back on stage. The crowd is in shock. Somebody just caught a beat down, and then we're all on stage right now ready to fight and protect ourselves. And Futura and Dondi are like the heroes at that point. And the crowd is just looking up at us in like shock and awe. And they just start, one person just starts, and then we got a standing ovation for a beatdown.
That's crazy. So we're looking at a Futura painting that's in your collection.
Yes.
5% from back in the day.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, he's somebody that's always supported the b-boys and the b-boy culture. But he wasn't a dancer at all. I've never seen Futura dance.
I have a picture of him doing a freeze though.
You do?
Yes, I do. I have a whole collection of photos that I've never put out.
Wow. So, you know, again, so again, keeping in with the theme of b-boys and the connection, right, of within the culture of dancing, you know, here, this was for the, what anniversary was this? A Rocksteady anniversary?
That was maybe the 18th anniversary, 18th or 19th. Yeah, could have been the 17th. I don't know. It's all a blur because I'm always stressed out because I lost so much money on those events. Yeah. But yeah, again, you know, we had to have Doze come in and do his thing because Doze was the official tissue when it comes to Rocksteady. Like Doze is the epitome of Rocksteady style. When you want somebody to put Rocksteady on paper, anything that is the Rocksteady aesthetic, you know, it's got to be Doze or like even like an East, because East was highly inspired, I believe, and from 808 Giants, he was inspired by Doze because of a lot of East characters and letter styles look a lot like Doze's style.
Yeah,
you know, in his early career.
Yeah,
so,
and you saw we had Doze on the other night, and it was a really enlightening conversation.
Yeah.
About those days and his connection to the dance, and how he kind of channels that through his work amazingly.
Yeah. Yeah. Doze captures everything, man. Like the vibe, the passion, like the mood, like, you know, that's a still picture that looks like it's moving, you know, and everything, you know, whenever Doze has done anything for me, it has been amazing.
Well, one of the things that's really cool is that you bring it to all your projects, right? All your events, and you know, the Puerto Rocksteady Festival as well. You have been, you know, in Puerto Rico steadily, and you know, Puerto Rico has a dynamic like b-boy culture historically, and also graffiti as well, writing. And you were honored out there. They named the street after you.
Well, not me, the crew.
The crew, rather.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I want to just kind of shine a little bit of light and give you a little bit of credit for the effort you have done for Puerto Rico and relief efforts there, and that, you know, as a culture, you know, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, we saw not just, you know, civilians, people joining in, but we saw the hip hop community supporting you on this as well.
Well, so the thing with number one, you know, I'm heavily invested emotionally, financially, whatever, in Puerto Rico. Also legacy-wise, because, you know, for me, the one thing that I got challenged on by Africa Bambaataa was my Puerto Ricanness, and he was like, "Hey, you're so if you're so proud to be Puerto Rican, you know, tell me what you're proud of besides music and food." And I was dead right there. Like I had nothing to throw back at him. And I realized that from an early age, when I was about 15, 16, that when the moment I felt like I could buy a home, I wanted it to be where my taxes can go towards supporting my people. So I bought a home in Puerto Rico the moment I could. And then a couple of years after that, I ended up going to a concert by Smash Mouth, like 5 minutes away from my house at Playa Montones. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I'm already like kind of done with doing Rocksteady anniversaries in New York. I wasn't really feeling the vibe anymore. It was becoming more and more difficult and financially straining. So I looked at it and just like said to myself, wow, I can do this here. And at the same time, I could bring my people to Puerto Rico who support me in my events and establish a lane for economic development in a place that I love and I feel could benefit from. So I started doing Puerto Rocksteady in Puerto Rico as a way to, you know, like I said, economic development. And then we also started doing things where it was about education and working with the Boys and Girls Club. So all that happening, you know, and then 2017 happens, and then Hurricane Maria happens. And Irma was right before Maria, and I was in Holland, and I was stressed out because I'm thinking, my friend's there, my home is there, and I'm thinking like, you got a Cat 5 hurricane taking off over there, or about to hit, and I'm at this event in Holland with my boy Joe Conzo and Curtis Blow, and I was super overwhelmed with people coming up to me, yo, can I take a picture? Can you sign this? Blah, blah, blah. And it got to a point where I was so overwhelmed, I was going to cry right on the spot. So I tell Joe Conzo, I'm like, yo, Joe, I can't stay here. I can't take this anymore. I got to go. So I went back to the hotel room, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know Diddy. I don't know Jay-Z. Some of the most powerful people within hip-hop, I didn't have the confidence to try to reach out to see if they would help me with what I felt was going to be a much-needed recovery for Puerto Rico. So, like, I started typing to Red Bull. I started typing to Red Bull, and I said, look, I don't mean to be out of line or cross any lines, but I'm in a situation where, you know, my heart is breaking over here. My people are going to be really destroyed in Puerto Rico. Can you help me help my people? And within 8 days after Hurricane Maria hitting, Red Bull has set me up with a company called Waves for Water and another company called Empowered. Waves for Water, we're doing activations with getting water filtration systems, like the one you see on that bucket, which can produce 1 million gallons of clean water, or it could support a family of 5 for 20 years. So not only is it going to help people during a disaster while you have bacteria in the water, you're looking at something that is going to be useful down the road. So the idea was like, how do we do something that's multi-layered and sustainable? And, you know, so Red Bull got me to Puerto Rico when Trump was saying that no planes could land in Puerto Rico. And Red Bull got me on a private plane 2 times with supplies, with a camera crew, and I was totally against documenting it because I'm thinking like, yo, I'm not trying to exploit my people. So I'm like kind of like not feeling the way Red Bull was saying, like, yo, we got to film this. And they were, and I was like, I can't do that to my people. I can't, you know, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, but
so
Red Bull is a media company, you know?
Yeah, but I'm not thinking like that because I'm Puerto Rican, and I'm thinking not only is it going to exploit my people, it's going to exploit me. So then they said, hey, Legs, this is about helping you to push your agenda further. And then they said, we don't even want you to wear the Red Bull logo. You know, we want you to make this about helping your people, and we want this to be about the mission. And then I started to understand that, but then, you know, as I realized, I'm like, all right, well, if that's the case, I should be representing Red Bull because you're helping me help people who are dying, and this is going to push the issue forward, push the needle forward in order for us to continue to work. So because of what Red Bull did, I was able to raise $200,000, which 100% of went towards sustainable efforts like supporting farmers, saving farms, supporting education, water filtration systems, solar lights that went into the deaf and hard of hearing communities. And shout out to Angela Maria from Off the Grid Missions, who taught me about that. And so we were able to basically, what Red Bull helped me do with these partnerships was to enable 200,000 people to have access to clean water. We put out over 3,000 solar lights. We put out toiletries. We put out all these things, you know. And not only that, like Tony Touch, DJ Enough, Puerto Rico Rob, my man Carlos from Classic Material, and myself, we formed like this coalition of people who would pull other people like Little Louis Vega, just like even now, check this out. This painting behind me, and I'm gonna show you real quick. This painting is done by Cat's Crew. They gave, you know, I went to them because I told them, you know, like the mission is still ongoing, you know, so, you know, I'm in this for life, you know,
right.
Until I can't move anymore. So this painting behind me is actually going to be auctioned, and the money from this painting is going to go towards education in Puerto Rico. You know, so, you know, because Red Bull taught me and put me in a position of empowerment to save people's lives, you know, it also gave me I guess, the inspiration to continue, because even recently with the earthquakes, Red Bull immediately got me back out there, and they sent tents down. They sent air mattresses down.
Right.
They sent all kinds of shit that we could take down to people in the south of Puerto Rico who are now homeless.
Right.
You know? And again, we were able to raise money, solar showers, all kinds of things. So you know,
I see that also, I guess, benefits that the other part of your venture with, you know, the Port Rock Steady Music Festival, because you integrate that into the awareness, the social awareness, into a concert where you bring young dancers and writers, graffiti writers. You bring everybody there. Last year you brought Fat Joe over as well.
Yeah.
And so you continue this mission ongoing. And do you see yourself, I guess you're preparing for 2020?
No, well, we just announced
canceled
today that Puerto Rock Steady is canceled for 2020. With the way COVID is going right now, and you know, us not having any kind of national strategy to beat that virus, and you know, things getting worse, we had to cancel for the sake of protecting people on the island from reckless tourists, and also protecting our people who are coming to party with us, do volunteer work, things like that. And you know, we'll just focus on 2021.
Got you.
And wait, let me just shout out real quick my homegirl Maria Isa from St. Paul, Minnesota, Immortal Technique, and Little Louis Vega, who were big donors towards what we were doing in Puerto Rico. So, you know, much love to them.
So shifting back to graffiti and b-boys, I selected some images for us to discuss as it's portrayed in the world. And again,
I selected another image too, but go ahead.
So, you know, it's interesting because the b-boy isn't just a dancer per se, right? It's a persona, let's just say.
I don't know. I gotta disagree with that.
Right, because I've heard Grandmaster Caz call himself a b-boy. You know, I've heard other.
Grandmaster Caz actually was a b-boy.
He was?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And so was Melly Mel.
Right.
And Flash was a b-boy too.
Well, you know, it is. Look, even I myself consider myself a b-boy, not a b-boy dancer. It's kind of this encompassing of a kind of I guess, persona culture. Oh, I mean, legitimately, of course, because I grew up with you guys and I was part of Rocksteady. But that there is this
flavor.
This is that persona, and
but you got no. I gotta correct you because this whole thing right here, even right over left, that comes from the 5% Nation of Islam. And then when you would drop your arm to form a 7, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 7 letter God, they see themselves as men or women, gods and earths. And also the stick-up kids would also be like that on the trains and ready to size you up. And I'm sure you were sizing people up too. So that was also not only the 5% Nation thing, it was also a hard rock stance. So for me as a B-boy, when people say, oh, I'm a B-boy too, it kind of takes away the definition from an element of that's being done by us as B-boys. Because, you know, writers, the word graffiti, writing, all that is exclusive to them. MCs, exclusive to them. DJs, exclusive to them. Why do B-boys and B-girls have to diversify the definition of our term, our title?
Wow, two things to point out. You just dropped today's mathematics, and I've been demoted from B-boy to writer.
Yeah, but you're a hard rock too, because I know you're a wild ass back in the day.
But again, you know, and you know, one of the things we see again is the influence in this particular drawing of Doe's Green, right? Of a writer / B-boy, and how this is something so conical, right? It's now and then and now and forever, a kind of aesthetic and look that's often tied to the lettering, right, and to the energy of graffiti writing culture.
Yeah, even the buildings look like they're moving. You know, I mean, you know, the whole idea of graffiti, like one I think in the Village Voice they said they called us physical graffiti.
Yeah.
So, and we were considered graffiti in motion.
Right.
You know.
Well, this. I'm glad you said that, and we're gonna pause for a second so I can save the video because we're gonna come back to that point, and it's an important point because it's something that I will express once we come back.
Okay.
But folks, I want you all to stay logged on. I'm just gonna save the video. It takes me about a minute or two. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. And again, Crazy Legs, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at the Museum of Graffiti and sharing your insight. And I will be right back.
Thank you. Right back to you.